And now we're going to turn to our old friend, Steve Jaffe, who spoke to us last year on the JFK Facts podcast earlier this year and has more to report. So take it away, Steve.
I had of all the jobs that I had when I was working as an investigator for Jim Garrison, one of the most interesting jobs was as the liaison between his office and the French Secret Service, which was a, a part of the SDECE, which is French intelligence, but there's a distinction made by some people that they're different departments and they don't work together. I can tell you that's not true. They do work together. And the man that I met with in Paris, it's a long story, which I will leave for another time, but the man that I met with in Paris was in the Elysee Palace, and he was just down the hall from President General de Gaulle's office. And the office that he had was set up for a meeting with an American. It was very obvious it didn't have all of the beautiful French appointments. But what was interesting about it, and the reason why I wanted to start off by mentioning it, is that of all the things we talked about, there were lists that I had brought with me of names, and we wanted to have their read on which suspects we felt were involved or could have been involved, and what was their read on these names. So the man that I met with was Andre Ducret, and he is searchable through AI. I'll put a lot about him in the book. And he had a twin brother who worked when I was there in the last days of May of 1968. His twin brother was working at Interpol and at a very high level. So there was a tremendous amount of help. It was all at the order of General de Gaulle, who said that he would just do anything to help us. And once we got that rolling, it was very important. The main reason I brought it up is that the only name that they gave me, which we didn't know, we hadn't heard of, we really hadn't searched in terms of our investigation because of the jurisdiction problems, and that was William K. Harvey. And they said unequivocally, when I said, can you give us a name that your agents know, that you know was involved? And it was one name, William K. Harvey. I had a discussion with David Talbot when I got after I read Devil's Chessboard, and I told him that was the one thing that they gave us, other than some important evidence like the Zapruder film, that was really important, but it was just more evidence to Garrison that the CIA was all over the thing, and that, as you know, Oswald had a long history with the CIA. And now that sort of brings me to a new mention, a new publication, That Day in Dallas. Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill JFK, and Robert K. Tannenbaum is an important guy. He worked under Dick Sprague. Dick Sprague was the head of the House Select Committee, and Tannenbaum, who came from a very decorated, respectable career as a prosecutor in Manhattan, who worked for Frank Hogan, a very famous district attorney. They both went to work after the House Select Committee was funded and established. And in the recent years, I was working as Mark Lane's partner for the better part of the last 50 years of his life, right up to the end. And he was very close to Bob Tannenbaum. So I saw Tannenbaum, and I had ordered his book, and I could tell that he wasn't in great shape, but that's the curse of aging for everybody. Anyway, it's a book that I recommend because of who he is, and because those of us who read the hundreds of books that come out and are really tired of the basic elements of the ballistics and all the other things that were important in the early days. This is a point of view from somebody which I think you'll find very valuable. It doesn't reveal an enormous amount of evidence, but one thing that's important is to know that Dick Sprague and Bob Tannenbaum, who were highly ethical prosecutors, when they found out that there was a limit, and it's described in this book, a limit to where they could go and what facts they could follow, they both resigned from the House Select Committee. Right. And said, sayonara. Right. The McCone-Rowley memo is a famous memo from March of 1964. It's one that's been debated, and pretty much it has been discarded and dismissed as fake, somebody who wanted to take the time to create a document. But if you look at it, and I look at things with an open mind, if you look at it and you read it and you research what's behind it, it provides an incredibly valuable piece of information. And I don't know what the committee under Representative Luna has done or might do about this document, but I think it's interesting to note that when that document was in a briefcase from the files of the House Select Committee that was owned by, the briefcase was owned by Bob Tannenbaum, it was one of the many documents that he took home that night to his apartment, and the whole thing was stolen. So all of the documents that were in his briefcase were documents that he considered important. And when I first talked to him about it, long before he wrote this book, I faxed it to him, or that's how far long ago it was. I actually could send it by fax. He didn't, endorse it. He didn't dismiss it. He just didn't feel that it was strong enough. On the other hand, in recent times, since I saw him publish it, and which is the second time I've seen it published in a book. The first time was in Robert Groden's book, Absolute Proof. Thank you. Anyway, and Robert Groden was the first person to tell me about it. And then I did some research to see if there was something about it that was important. And obviously, you just look at page 1 of it, and it's McCone talking to the chief of the Secret Service and saying that Oswald was trained by this agency under the auspices of naval intelligence. And that is an extraordinary fact to be admitted. That memo was also either ordered by or fell into the hands of Robert Kennedy very early on. And as you know, Robert Kennedy was conducting his own investigation and doing, that was almost all he did, day in and day out.
So we're familiar with the memo. The question is it
Yeah.
is it legitimate? And so, like, we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
and even, Jeff explained as well that, there are certain questions about it. Even the coding seems off. What is it that you think? What have you seen that makes it it tells you that it's a real document?
I've shown it to people who are either in the CIA or were in the CIA, and they say that the language used and the way it was dictated is language that would be consistent with a director or somebody at that level.
Stephen,
There are more people who have come about to that view, and even though the coding of it was altered, it was stolen from the files after Senator Church requested it. It was stolen from the files of the HSCA, and there are two or three other solid witnesses who make me think that this is a legitimate document.
And
so Stephen, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Are any of those people willing to go on the record with their name saying, I believe this is an authentic document that we could quote in a story?
Yeah. The first
Okay.
person that I asked a long time ago, which I just explained, was Tannenbaum, because he was the director of that part of the HSCA that was investigating the JFK assassination. There was the other part that was dealing with MLK. So what I would do is set up an interview with Bob Tannenbaum.
No, anybody besides Tannenbaum, anybody from the CIA or the Secret
because when he
Service.
went on Graubert, he said that Groden's the one that vouched for the document to him. So
Yeah,
it goes back
Groden
to
got it.
Groden, and then Groden claims that he saw it in HSCA. We still don't know. We still don't have the provenance of that document. Like, how did it end up there?
Well, I can't talk about what I know and without asking permission to use names that you would like to
Okay.
have me
Okay.
reveal. So all I can
That's-
say
I
is
mean-
that it deserves another look, and
Okay.
it deserves a serious look.
All right, let's turn to the backyard photos, because that's the real important, great.
Right.
Yeah.
What I've been doing since March of 1968 is working on scientific and forensic evidence having to do with the famous backyard photos, CE 133A and B and C. And in those days, we were limited in terms of the technology that we could provide the DA. We were also limited in terms of the cost that it would take and did take. But we were able to raise money independently and put together something which I would like to share with you, but I can't do it in this kind of Zoom format without setting it up in advance. But I do plan to release it before the end of the year in different formats, mainly online and accessible through a website, which will be launched. And for, I hope I'm not out of line, but it'll be called Oswald's Alibi. And that will be revealed in the next month or two. And I've written a whole section on it, and there are photographs that will back up what I was able to do. Mainly, I was able to compare the work of anybody who was, the evidence itself, and in doing it as a person who's familiar with photogrammetry and a so-called expert, I was able to prove scientifically, and you got to remember, I was working for the DA, so this has to be able to be cross-examined, and I have to be able to go into court and prove this is a scientific truth beyond a reasonable doubt. I did that, and the information was stolen from the office, and the photos and all that was stolen from the office prior to the trial, but during the last part of the Garrison investigation in 1968. And I have all that material because obviously I made comments, I made copies. And I have now run it by at least 4 engineers and people who don't know much about the Kennedy assassination. We had a survey done of the backyard itself at 214 Neely Street, and it's a scientific professional survey. We had it examined by engineers from Ohio State and from other countries, and I was able to show it to the editor at Life magazine at the time, who bought or didn't buy the photos, but was responsible for the backyard photos, and who was responsible for the what we call CE 133A ending up on the cover of Life magazine.
Now, you said that you had confirmation from Life magazine person that
Yeah,
that this is a fake. Is that what you were saying?
yes, yeah.
So
I
can you
have
kind of
confirmation in writing, and
can you elaborate on that? I mean, what's fake?
yeah.
How did that work out?
Well, what happened was I was meeting with Garrison one day, and we were talking about the backyard photos, and what there was in terms of a DA trying to plan a case that tied him to the weapon. And it occurred to me the only thing that really tied him to the murder weapon, so-called murder weapon, was this photograph. And in terms of how media can influence people, to me, it seemed like the most incriminating piece of evidence that we had to deal with. So that's what I did. And I've been doing it for over 50 years. Now we have technology that's far and away advanced. And I have a letter from the Life magazine editor. It says that after reviewing this report and the evidence of the people that support it, the experts that support it, he is convinced beyond any doubt that they were taken advantage of, and that Life magazine published a false, fake composite, and that what Oswald was referring to when he was being interrogated by Captain Fritz was true, and that it was a composite or superimposition of his face on the body of somebody else.
Now, is this person still alive, or did they?
No, he passed away at age 87 a few years ago.
Was that
But
Vagen World, whatever?
yeah, but I have a videotape, in which he makes roughly the same statement, although I said it has to be tighter and stronger, and he gave me a letter, which is indeed, I think very compelling.
Are there things that you can share that led you to believe that?
Well, I testified for over 5 hours in front of the Rockefeller Commission lawyers,
Okay,
which included one of our friends from the Warren Commission, David Bellin.
right.
And in the afternoon, they asked me if I could come back the next day because they were getting nowhere, and I was able to persuade them with what I had at the time. And they needed people who were more familiar with photogrammetry, who could question me. So I did. I came back the next day. Um, there were others in the room, the witnesses, who I think are still alive, but I got, written. I have a letter from Groden, who was there. And the report, one of the more persuasive things about the value was not only did I testify for 5 hours about this, and then had to be cross-examined by their experts, so-called experts, the next day. But when the report was issued in June, it didn't even mention that I was there. And yet the list of witnesses for that period of time was just a week, within a few days, included Angleton and some other names that were really high level people in our index here, and I was really surprised that they didn't even mention, me, if only to dismiss it.
So
So
you were in executive session. It wasn't a public hearing, right?
it wasn't a public hearing.
And,
It
and
was
is
there were
there
a
any
lot of people present.
is there a transcript of your testimony?
There was a transcript made because not only do I know that, but I also was struck by the fact that instead of a courtroom reporter who usually types on that machine, I can't remember what it's called, but you know what the stenographers use.
Yes. Yeah.
This time it was recorded by a man talking into a megaphone as if a megaphone was turned backwards. So he was repeating every word, and it went into a tape recording, which was later transcribed. So I set about, this was back 15 years ago, I set about trying to prove not just what I said, because that was easy, but to prove that I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And after a tremendous amount of work searching everywhere, lo and behold, it was the transcript is still missing, but the fact that I was there is there are multiple references to it from documents in the Gerald Ford Library, which I'm very proud of.
So the actual transcript of your testimony is missing, but the fact that you were interviewed by them is documented.
Oh, highly documented, yes. It even says which boxes contain the evidence that I submitted as exhibits. And it says Jaffe, and I think it spelled my name wrong with two E's, which is very common. And it says, that I'd given them evidence that was in box number 2 and so forth. So yeah, and it's stamped Gerald Ford Library, and those documents that mentioned that we were deposed are still there.
This guy Henry Fareed that used to be at Dartmouth
Yeah,
did a 3D animation study in '09 and 2010, I think, published a couple of articles
right.
suggesting that the photos were not at least one photo. He only studied one photo and said it was not altered, that there was nothing about the photo that would suggest there was something wrong with the body, the way the body was. And you said that you spoke to him?
Yeah, after his videotape came out, which was, I must say, a very well-produced videotape, um, and it's on YouTube. His name is Hani Farid, Farid, and he's a professor at Dartmouth, or at least he was. I'm looking at a document that was published in 2009. In any event, his articles and his interview, they're published and you can Google them, but also the interview with him is there on YouTube. And what's interesting is when I called him, I kind of buttered him up a little bit and said that, I'd studied his work, which was true. And then I may have flattered him a little bit too much, so he kind of relaxed. And I think because he was used to being criticized. But I said to him at the end of it, I used to work for a district attorney, and I looked at this in a way that was, as a forensic investigator, which is different than just somebody looking at some photos. And I said we had to prepare this for a trial. And what I can't understand is the fact that there were two photographs, in fact, maybe more, but there were two photographs. There was a living witness, that's Marina Oswald, and I interviewed Marina Oswald, and she admitted that she had not taken the photographs. And I interviewed her, in fact, at Mary Farrell's house.
Hmm.
And that also you made the biggest blunder I've ever seen in terms of an expert investigation in a scientific paper, and that is that you didn't use all of the evidence and you didn't compare photo A, 133A, to 133B. And if you had, you would have known that it wasn't the shadow disparity from beneath Oswald's nose and the disparity with the body shadow that mattered. It was the fact that there was a B photograph. And in the B photograph, if you do the study correctly, which I will publish, the faces are absolutely identical. And even though the sun could have moved between snapping one photo and then snapping the other, it would have taken it 5 minutes to move 2 degrees. And yet the disparity is actually 7 degrees.
Mm,
How do you explain that? And he hung up.
mm. So I just want to clarify, what you're talking about is stuff that you did during the Garrison era, right? You
Right, right.
haven't done any new studies, and what you're doing is you're publishing the results of the studies that you did for Garrison.
I'm publishing the study of the results of the study I did for Garrison and a modern day study that includes going back to the backyard and having it, surveyed,
Okay.
and having people who are living experts in photogrammetry, as
Okay.
well as the Life magazine editor, comment upon the findings
And when did you do this most recent?
over the last 3 years.
Okay. And who are you able to say who you used to do this?
I did it myself.
Oh, okay. But you
Oh,
got
you mean
guys helped
oh
you
yeah,
with
the
it.
name of the company that did the survey, all of it will be in the book,
Okay. Okay.
you know. So that's what I got to tell you.
Okay. Bob, and then Gary, and then Mark.
Steve, it's Bob here. I had done a similar analysis back in the 70s, and I also collaborated with Jack White from California.
Very good.
And so you're nodding your head, which I guess is sort of an answer to the question. But did you ever exchange evidence with him, have any conversations with him? The results that I got through my photographic analysis were very similar to what you're describing here. There's nothing that I have seen compelling to convince me otherwise, where the otherwise is that these were not composite photographs. So I'm wondering what your comments are about Jack White's work, because he was deposed back in, I think, 77 by Counsel Gensman during the House Select Committee. And he basically, they didn't give him a lot of time, an opportunity for detail, but he came to those conclusions. And in fact, that was the moment, as I recall, that 133A and B were put into evidence in the House Select Committee, was a direct result of White's testimony. So do you have any recollection or comments about your relationship with Jack White?
Yeah, I never spoke to Jack White. I didn't know him. I knew Penn Jones, who was a friend of his, and I saw the work that I had done for the DA, end up in part, never the whole thing, but some of it drift out over the internet in years, even after that would be after White did his initial work. But he did excellent work, and he managed to put it out on videotape and so forth. And it wasn't that our work was different. It's that mine can hold up to the kind of cross-examination and scientific forensic criticism that one would expect if you were not just being deposed.
Understood. There's just the other thing, and I'm not going to ask this question because it's probably more detailed than this is necessary. But in addition to the things you see on the photographs with respect to compositing, every camera also leaves sort of a fingerprint, which is the framing in the internal mechanism in which the negative is held in the camera. And there's also interesting data there that challenges whether that negative could have come out of the box camera. Plus the fact that it's interesting that there are more prints than there are negatives.
Yeah.
And the fact is that there's a third print that surfaced, C, which adds more complexity. So I'm just adding this so that those who are on the call and listening to your fascinating testimony, Steve, might want to take a little diversion down the path of the backyard photos to get a sense of whether these were contrived. And if they were, it had to have been done beforehand.
Yeah, to me, it's the reason why I think it's a contribution that I can, point to, because I really never wanted to write a book about this work. I really hadn't planned on it, but seeing how badly somebody has to say this is a fact that cannot be disputed, and it has to be simple enough, and it has to be presented in such a way that your average jury, and I have great respect for juries, but your average jury could tell the facts as well as as an expert. And the point is, yes, I think there are things about the camera that are very important, and I will deal with that. But as you know, when Oswald's belongings and his personal effects were picked up from Ruth Payne's house, and you have, I think it's Commission Exhibit 2003, you have a photograph of the kind of cameras that Oswald had. I mean, he had a spy camera, which is a Minox, that in those days was a very sophisticated piece of spy work. And he has a Minox light meter and all kinds of things in just that one photograph of the personal belongings that are make you wonder why, what would have happened if he had lived to tell the tale. The other thing is that the camera that took those photographs was in the possession of his brother, Robert Oswald, and Oswald's brother didn't turn it over to the authorities for months on end, and it wasn't among his effects. And also, technically, you can create an image and photograph it with Oswald's camera, or so-called Oswald's camera, and it will have similar markings along the edge of the negative.
I mean, what's fascinating is Oswald reportedly had very expensive camera equipment for a guy that doesn't have a lot of money. He buys a cheap rifle and a cheap pistol, but he has very expensive camera equipment, which is did you ever get a chance to share your information with the HSCA or the ARB?
No, I was actually working with Mark up until he died in 2016. But during the days in the late 70s, we were doing things that that helped in the case. But Mark was working as an attorney for James Earl Ray. And so I was doing heavy research on what became a book called Murder in Memphis. And Mark Lane and Dick Gregory got that published. And Lane was representing James Earl Ray before the committee, which was on the other side of the investigation. So I never was asked, nor were, the trial was over. Garrison had been completely, well, he'd been unsuccessful.
Yeah, no, we know. And so you were
know what
working
happened.
on the MLK side, but you didn't either volunteer or be asked about this information about your work on the backyard photos by the Kennedy side of the committee.
No, because ironically, that's when Mark Lane provided evidence that he had come up with that had to do with Oswald, and he presented it to Bob Tannenbaum, who he'd never met. And that's when they first met, and that was the extent of it. I really didn't get involved in the Kennedy side.
And the ARB didn't ask you for information either. Okay.
No, I was I'd kind of gone out of sight, after the Garrison trial. there was really nothing more I felt that I could do.
Okay. Gary and then Mark.
Yeah, Steve, this is Gary Severson. I
Hi.
agree with your analysis. I just want to add a few things that you may remember. I was interacting with James Wagenvord before he passed, of course, starting about 10 years ago, 8 years ago. And that led me to contact you. And our discussion was about the editor at Life magazine, who I had done a profile of, published in the fourth decade in 1999. Now, I went from Minneapolis to New York and spent 6 hours with the Life editor, Edward K. Thompson. And he had passed away in 1995. And I was at his house where she still lived. And I had the kind of crazy idea that if anybody had an original Z film, it would be the editor at Life, since he had possession of it the weekend of the assassination.
Yeah.
Now, Edward K. Thompson in 63, at the time of the assassination, had interestingly been bumped up to the editor position. He had been the managing editor from 1939 until 62, and he micromanaged publishing 600 consecutive issues of Life magazine. And he, in his autobiography that I read before I met with his wife for 6 hours up north of Chappaqua, didn't say a thing about his time at Life that had anything to do with the assassination. But what I knew when I went to interview his wife was that he had been hired out of the Milwaukee Sentinel-Journal in about 1939. And the reason that Luce hired him was because Edward K. Thompson was a master compositor. He had perfected a cutting technique at the Milwaukee Sentinel-Journal to make composite photos for the cut lines to be invisible in a newspaper. And so Luce knew about that. Thompson, basically applied his, or tempted Luce with his ability to do composites. Now, when it came time to publish the Warren Commission, Rankin, I guess the chief counsel would be who he was for the Warren Commission. I have the memos, and he requested from Thompson the negative of the backyard photo 3 or 4 times. And apparently Thompson ignored him each time. And finally, sometime towards the end of the Warren Commission research, he sent a memo to Thompson and said, "You will have the negative," I think he said original negative, "to me by 4:30 on such and such a date." I think it was April. And Thompson turned over the negative. And in his response to Rankin, he said, "I just touched up the photo around his calf, his thigh, his shoulder, and a little bit of the rifle." So here I call it a limited hangout. I believe that he had the skills to put Oswald's head on somebody's body, which agrees with what you're saying. I just don't know that. And Wagenvord pretty much agreed with me. Thompson was so high, his office was next door to Luce. And one day, Dulles came to the office, and Dulles had been fired by JFK, and Wagenvord witnessed Thompson ordering a check for $3,000 to be cut for Dulles. And Wagenvord said anybody else to get a check cut would have taken at least till the next day.
He told me that too.
Yeah, and this was done almost immediately. So my point is that Edward K. Thompson was quite involved in the whole scene, especially since he had master compositing skills. And the only way I got to him or his wife was that he happened to be a graduate of the University of North Dakota. And when I picked up an alumni review one day about 1997, there was a photo of a bunch of Wall Street bankers that had graduated from the University of North Dakota. One was actually named John Hancock. But there was Edward K. Thompson in the picture, and I'd never seen him before, hadn't heard of him. I called the alumni services and I said, is this guy alive? No, but do you want his wife's phone number? You know, back in the day, it was like if you're an alumni, they figure you might talk your friend into donating $1 million to the university. So they just handed out his phone number. I got to her. She said, are you coming to New York? I said, I will. And I got there. I was staying with Stuart Gallinar, whoever everybody knows, I guess. And I got on the train at Grand Central, but I found out ahead of time she had canceled our appointment by one day for some family function. It was around July 4th. So I went to Strand's bookstore and I searched through as many Life magazine books as I could find, and they had a whole stack, a whole section. And I discovered that his wife was considered to be a fellow traveler of the Communist Party. And it's interesting, in Thompson's autobiography, he said, the one thing I wish I had known more about was Marxism. She told me that the biggest disagreement they had was over the Vietnam War. She was on the plane headed for Tokyo with the cabinet when it was announced that JFK had been killed and the plane turned around. So again, a pretty significant witness to what her husband was involved in. And at one point she said, do you want to see my husband's retirement party at Life? I said, sure. So she puts the videotape on, and I'm thinking, geez, I wonder if the Z film is in this stack of tapes. And about 7 minutes into the tape, there were 3 what sounded like superimposed gunshots on the party for his retirement. And the narrator had just said at that point, Ed had finally arrived. He was hobnobbing with presidents, and it showed him walking down the street with Truman. And then the 3 shots. And I turned to her and I said, what was that? She says, I don't know. Well, she was at the party, but it was like she was in a trance. And my reading of her body language was that she knew that her husband had been involved up to his neck in the production of that fake photo, but she was not going to be disloyal to him and say anything about that fact. But the night before, my wife had said, you're not gonna get the Z film, you're gonna get something you don't expect. So I asked her if I could record the video. I got up, I put my tape recorder, turned it to record. She walked up next to me and pulled a duplicate out of a stack and says, "Oh, here, I have a duplicate, you can have it." And that tape has been shown at various conferences in Dallas and so on. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. But I appreciate what you've done, what you were doing way back in '67 with Garrison. And I'll be anxious to see your book.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Gary. Mark, you'll be the last one because it's around 9:30 and we're been on for an hour and a half. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think it seems to me like in any theory of the photographs being forged, it's very important to theorize when you think it was forged, because as I understand, George de Mohrenschildt had one photo, and so it must have been forged before. It had to have been forged before he went to Haiti, which was right after Easter 1963. This photo, as I understand it, was in his storage, and it wasn't found till way after, maybe the 70s or something.
That's a true story, but I don't know how true, and I don't know how important it is. You know, when we were dealing with it, there was no mention of a third photo, and all we needed were the two photos to prove that they were fake. And that,
Actually,
you know,
isn't George's photo a fourth photo in theory?
yeah, it could be.
And it has writing on it.
But-
It has the Russian writing.
Yeah,
Охотник с фашистами, ха ха ха. That's the one
we
that
don't
has it.
know. We don't know who wrote that.
And it was in pencil and then
Okay, so when did it show up? When was
Well, the important
was
thing-
it in the storage for all that time or not?
I don't know. The important thing is that obviously these photographs were composites that were done by extremely sophisticated artists. And they may have been people who worked for Life magazine or not, but they were done in advance of the assassination with the express purpose, obviously, of incriminating Oswald. And once you prove that, you have proved the conspiracy. You
Well,
can-
I
But
think
it would have to be before Easter 1963, right?
yeah. But the
you-
other thing is these photos did not show up when they searched the pain
they
record.
had to go back the next day.
It had to go back the next day, and that's when they were discovered. So
Right.
so I guess there's 2 points, two possible points. It's either the night of the assassination, or if you believe that the Demonstrield photo was an original that he had in his possession, then that had to be done in the spring.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark,
And didn't it have Oswald's I'm not sure, didn't it have Oswald's signature on it, a dedication to
No,
George?
it didn't, but
Okay.
it had words in Russian, but nobody knows.
That's all it had?
it had, well, first it was in pencil, then apparently it was, I think, inked over, you know. But I'm not sure, maybe someone here knows. I don't think that the writing was ever linked to Marina. Allegedly, the story is Marina wrote that. That's the official story,
I
right?
think they tested it, and I think some experts say that she traced over it, and it was her handwriting, but it's open.
Yeah.
Some experts said that, I think, if I'm not wrong.
But that's a good point. I mean,
It has to be part of a theory, or else you have to decide, well, okay, was it in storage or not? You know, so
'Cause in
it seems
April
very
of
important, that picture.
I mean, April '63, he's not even working in a depository building.
Right.
So it's hard to say. So for them to say that that's when it was, I mean, unless there was an operation in place that they needed to have him, and maybe this was in preparation for going to New Orleans. That's the only thing I can think of. If they did it then in March of '63, it would be to help buttress his bona fides for this cover that he was going to do in New Orleans handing out leaflets and stuff. I mean, I'm just speculating. I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
six-
you know, but by the way, I just want to make one point
Yeah.
because Mark just mentioned, he just said the Russian that's on the bag. It says "Охотник фашистов, ha ha ha." So the ha 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 makes it look like whoever wrote it knew that the photo was some kind of, you know, not joke, but some kind of, you know, stunt or fabrication being done for some purpose. In other words, look, somebody's made this photo and it's really silly because look, there's Oswald's face on this, you know. So somebody, you know, it looks like someone was convinced just to admit that it was authentic and then made a joke out of it. But I mean, it was 1967, I believe, that George de Mohrenschildt found it, or his wife. It fell out of an LP sleeve or something, I
So
think.
that would be another incriminating piece of Oswald that was fell out of a book. We have two Ruth Paine notes, right? Notes, books that Ruth Paine held that
Right.
were given over, and suddenly they have the Walker note and some other note that I think about writing to the Russian embassy or something that
Larry?
mysteriously shows up.
May I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. The importance of that third Oswald Backyard photograph is that it was found in the effects of Roscoe White,
Mm.
and it was determined that it was the only one that was from the original negatives.
Oh,
And since he worked in the photographic department of the Dallas Police Department, what happened to the negatives that those originated from? Obviously, they had them at one time, but they disappeared. So it's an intriguing little question about how they handled the evidence and the materials in this case. It's an important photograph, I have no doubt, and that they went to all the trouble of trying to duplicate it with a Dallas policeman is amazing.
yeah. I mean, I'm saying that if Mark is right, let's say that this photo was made actually in 1960, in March of 63, it could be part of an operation for Oswald to be doing something and not necessarily in connection with the assassination, because he wasn't yet in place to be able to be blamed for the assassination. He wasn't working at the school book department. I'm just trying to think out loud here that,
Right.
right? And
Marina, by the way, Marina told me that there was a fourth photograph with Oswald holding the rifle over his head.
huh.
Now, we've never seen that, but she says that it happened and that
Didn't she-
it
The one thing I was able to establish, and we followed up after I told Garrison, was that Marina's statements were in conflict with themselves,
Right.
and that she was constantly inconsistent. What she did admit to me was that she was frightened and that she was under control of the government. And that's all we needed to hear.
Well,
But she
actually,
wasn't-
I heard
wasn't
a,
under control of the government when she talked to me.
I heard the full on YouTube today. I heard the full interview tape between the full quote unquote between Hoover and LBJ on the 24th, and Hoover says that she's not being cooperative, and something to the effect that she's afraid that she's going to be deported, and that Hoover has authorized his agents to tell her that if she cooperates, that won't be a problem. But Gary, I read somewhere where there's a discrepancy with the way the camera is set up and how she said that she took the picture. That she said she looked down at the viewfinder when in fact you have to put it up to your eye and look through it. Is that
It's
correct?
just the reverse.
Oh,
It's just the reverse. Instead of looking through a camera like a Nikon, the Imperial Reflex camera is one that you hold at your waist and you look down into the viewfinder.
okay.
And there's another curiosity too that is a nit for this conversation. But just like finding only 4 rounds of 7 points or 6.5 millimeter ammunition, there are 12 exposures on a conventional roll from a reflex camera. What about the other 8 or 7 or 9? You know, in other words, that has always been a curiosity. Does anybody have their roll of film processed and throw away everything but 3, negatives and photographs that will incriminate somebody. So it just some food for thought.
So, Gary, if would your operating thesis be that somehow Roscoe White got his hands on the camera or the negatives the night of the assassination and then created what is your operating thesis? What? You're on mute. You're on mute. You have to unmute, Gary.
You gotta unmute, Gary.
There you go.
I'm not sure. What it amounts to is that Roscoe White had a copy of the third photograph made from the original negative, and that he made those photographs in the Dallas Police Department lab.
Right. Okay. So the inference is that is evidence that the negatives were made in the police lab.
That they had the negatives at one time in the police lab.
Yeah.
These were snapshots. You understand what they had from Roscoe White was an 8x10, and I don't know anything further than that.
Now, were they shown to Oswald on Friday or Saturday? Because he denied.
I believe they were shown on Friday.
On Friday.
Yeah, I think.
Yes, it was on Friday because my friend Roger Craig was there, and he wasn't there for the interview on Saturday.
That's what Oswald said. That's my face, but that's not my body.
Right, and he was shown an 8x10.
So I wonder, speculating is that they found photographs at the Payne residence, but they didn't put it into evidence until the next day so they could doctor them.
Yeah, and then the Dallas police went out and took photographs of an officer named Brown in that position in the days after the assassination, and which was kind of funny. They were trying to duplicate his pose with the Dallas policeman in that position. I don't know what they were doing.
So Gary, let me play this out. I'm just playing this out.
Mm-hmm.
So Oswald's arrested. They don't know about the location where the photographs are taken yet, right? Someone has got to take pictures of someone holding a rifle in the right place and then put Oswald's face on it and show it to him sometime on Friday.
That's the way I understand it.
Yeah.
Chad, what were you saying?
It looks very much as though the work was done and was so sophisticated that it's not the kind of thing you could do in a night, and it would be the kind of thing you would do as part of a plan that would be hatched well in advance. What do you do to incriminate the patsy? And
so you know that Oswald's going to be the patsy.
right.
You take photographs from the location where he was living, and then you impose his picture so that you have it. And I guess Roscoe just happens to, because he works in a lab, he has a copy of it.
And just conveniently, he's wearing a handgun at his waist, which the holstering does not represent anything you would have with the revolver that was recovered at the Texas Theater. And of course, he's holding a copy of The Worker and another Marxist piece of literature. And
opposing
then
organizations, and they never found the clothes that he was wearing, right?
Right. And then the silhouette of the long arm has been in dispute for years. Does it really match a Carcano when, it's a strap similar? Just everything about it
And
is something that a good defense attorney would attack in a court of law.
And how does a copy of it be found in de Morenschild's effects? How does it get there? Where does it come from to get to him?
Right.
Right. It's a strange, obviously a plant of some kind to me. Yeah.
Chad, so Steve, thank you so much for volunteering the information. We look forward to your book. Chad, anything you want to leave us with before we sign off for the night? Anything you got, things you're working on that you're going to be going to NARA for or something, or?
Well, I'm working on a couple of things, but I I don't think they necessarily bear mentioning at the moment, but just to reiterate that, you know, basically what Jack Reed found was something that was released in the March 2025 release, or this year. So, I mean, it's just an example of why it's just not a waste of time to go through these documents. There are a ton of them. You know, you are going to get moved around as you go through them, but it's just proof that there is like stuff in there. It's not smoking gun proof of a conspiracy, but it's very important stuff, and it really can form, I think, dynamic and pretty much bombshell stories in many respects. And we've already found like a lot of really interesting stuff, and we're still finding it. So people should not be deterred. And if you don't live in the DC area, I ran into Jack at least once in Nara too. And it's nice to be able to go in and handle the actual physical documents, apart from the fact that not everything is online yet. But all of the stuff that's unredacted is supposed to be online, except for that stuff that Andrew Eiler and Mark Adamczyk are going after. But apart from that, everything's supposed to be there. So, you know, I would just say to people, take the time to go through it. You might hit upon something really exciting, and then follow it. And if it doesn't lead anywhere, you've still learned something. So I just wanted to say that. I think
I'm a great example again. Just encourage people to. I mean, you can use that website to compare documents. And I mean, what Jack did was, he's not a regular writer with us, and did an amazing piece of work. I filed a FOIA request with NARA for a bunch of records that are not online, to see whether they'll scan them and send them to me. And I'm just about to file my FOIA request for all correspondence between NARA and the Biden White House about the postponements.
excellent.
So with no other comments, I think this was quite, again, this is the value of JFK Facts. This is just an incredible example tonight of stuff, that the value of what's being done. So please, people, we have a lot of documents got to look at. So I encourage you once again to do this. So Chad, we'll see you next week, hopefully.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Thanks. Yeah. Good to see everyone.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
Dan, I hope your book sells well. I showed it last week before you weren't on.
Thank you so much. I hope so. I think it's an interesting story.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. All
Okay,
right. Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night.
Hey everybody, I wanted to call your attention to one surefire way to deepen your knowledge of the assassination of President Kennedy. And that's to read my 3 books about the CIA, a trilogy of spies that tells how the assassination actually unfolded in the eyes of CIA insiders. You see, my work on JFK's assassination is rooted not in the literature of conspiracy, but in the history of CIA operations. And that makes all the difference when it comes to understanding the events that culminated on November 22nd, 1963. You'll want to check out my 3 CIA books that tell the story of the founding generation of the Central Intelligence Agency, and what 3 insiders actually thought about JFK's assassination. Meet charismatic Station Chief Winston Scott as he surveils Lee Harvey Oswald 6 weeks before Dallas. Meet urbane CIA Director Richard Helms as he fends off President Richard Nixon's attempts to blackmail him over JFK's assassination. Meet James Angleton, the ingenious, paranoid, and sinister counterintelligence chief who had controlled the agency's file on Oswald since 1959. In these books, you'll see the real historical foundation of the events that led to President Kennedy's assassination, and you'll understand this event in a much deeper way. Check out my books at jeffersonmorleybooks.com. You can buy all of these books there, as well as my other nonfiction book, Snowstorm in August. So check out the Trilogy of Spies.